Hello everyone and welcome to the full moon in Sidereal Virgo guided releasing practice for April 6th, 2020. I'm Phaedra. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystick, Physick, Astrology. And I use the Western Sidereal astrology in my practice to help you really reconnect with your soul purpose and to help you remember why you came into this life to begin with. And so welcome to the broadcast. I'm just going to check really quickly and make sure that we're streaming correctly. Hopefully, if you're joining me live, you can let me know whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. If you can hear me and see me okay. We had some audio issues with our Sidereal Insights Astro Update broadcast earlier today on YouTube. There seemed to be some sort of distortion in the audio, and hopefully that was related to the order that I started everything in, and hopefully we're not experiencing that now. But if anyone is watching from YouTube, please let me know. I'm going to check real quick on Facebook. So I don't know that I have access to the combined chat. I have it set up. If anyone wants to test that out and let me know, I'd be happy to check the combined chat. From either side of things, from the YouTube or the Facebook side of things. But welcome. I don't want to say I'm excited for this full moon. It's kind of a yucky full moon. I really don't care for it from a sidereal perspective, to be quite frank. I want to talk with you all a little more in depth about the nature of this full moon. Really, my aim with these broadcasts is to offer you guidance on how you can consciously use the energy of the transiting planets to really kind of affect your life in a positive way. There's not really a whole heck of a lot positive to be found in this particular full moon. But what we're going to do with this live stream is identify any kind of old patterns which maybe aren't serving you any longer. We're going to set ourselves up to let go of bad or unhelpful habits which might be holding us back. And we're going to look for ways that we can step into selfless service so that we can kind of get out of our rut and make room for fresh new approaches to daily life, which I think is something that a lot of us could really use a hand with right now. Our daily lives have really been upended. There's no really nice way of saying it. We've been kind of turned upside down and shaken like a snow globe, and nothing's really quite right for most of us in the world. It has taken quite a bit of getting used to, and I want to just encourage you all to be gentle with yourselves right now, given what we're all going through. It's quite unprecedented, excuse me. And really, I think has the potential for a lot of folks who are living through it to be quite traumatic. And even if it's not traumatic in and of itself, I think it can be quite triggering for a lot of us, given the types of changes and the types of uncertainties that we're having thrown at us right now. So I just want to encourage you to be gentle with yourself, be kind, be forgiving. Don't be too hard on yourself. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on the chats as we go through tonight's broadcast, just to kind of stay on top of any live comments. And if anyone's joining me live, normally I see folks live from the Facebook group, but we are broadcasting live to YouTube as well. And so if you're joining me from YouTube, welcome. This is kind of a brand new thing. It's an exciting change for us, I think. In this particular broadcast, we've been wanting to make this shift in how we do our live streaming for a long time, and things have finally come in place. But welcome. So what you are going to want to do with tonight's broadcast is you're going to want to grab a pen and paper. You're going to want to grab your sidereal natal chart, a beverage, your beverage of choice, and bring with you, please, your willingness to surrender to your highest good. That's always very much an important part of the full moon releasing practices. If you don't have your sidereal natal chart, you can look that up online for free at mystickphysick.com/sidereal tools. And I included, I believe, I hope, a link to that in the video description for you. And if not, I will add it to the video description after the fact. Welcome. So what we're going to kind of do is we're going to approach this in kind of three separate stages, three separate parts. The first part of the broadcast tonight, we're going to take a closer look at this particular full moon in Virgo. It's kind of yucky and stinky. I don't really care for it. In part two, we're going to get into which house this falls into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign. So this is where you need to know your sidereal natal chart. We're looking at your rising sign. We're working with our natural houses. You can also do these practices with your solar houses, which means you can do it for your sun sign. If you want to do the full moon releasing twice, once for your rising sign, once for your sun sign, feel free. You can do the same thing with the new moon intention settings that we do as well. In part three, what we will do is we will dig a little bit deeper into the archetype of Virgo and the themes of Virgo as a constellation, as a sign, as a zodiac sign. And then we will explore, excuse me, it's kind of smoky in here because I was burning some incense while I kind of prepared the space. In just one moment, if you will. I made some tea this time. I didn't have tea with me when I did the earlier broadcast today. This time I was prepared. I decided I would have some tea ready just in case. So yes, and we'll explore the Virgo archetype a little bit more in depth. We'll talk about the themes of the sign of Virgo, and I have some prompts prepared. We'll walk through some prompts to kind of give you some inspiration around things that you might consider releasing or letting go of, or just kind of moving out of your life with this particular full moon. And so this full moon, April 7th, that's tomorrow, is going to be in Virgo, exact at 23 degrees, 42 minutes. And what I want you to remember, this is just like the last couple of weeks, 10 days or so-ish, really, when we have all of the planets in direct motion. Until April 25th, when Pluto, the first of the outer planets, stations retrograde. Excuse me. Yes, it's smoky in here, and now it's bothering my throat. So Mercury rules this full moon, with it being in Virgo, according to the Fagan Bradley Sidereal Zodiac. And Mercury just today entered Pisces. And that is his sign of detriment when you consider Mercury as the ruler of Virgo. We don't like Mercury in his sign of detriment. Mercury in the sign that has to do with secrets. That's just bad news. Mercury in the sign that we would associate with, say, something like religious confession. Just bad news. That's not really where you want Mercury. Yeah, and it just so happens that Mercury at the exact same time makes this nice, perfectly exact sextile to Jupiter, just as Jupiter enters Capricorn. And normally we might go, yay, we have some nice protection from Jupiter here. Jupiter being the great benefic, Jupiter being the giver of gifts and luck. No, because Jupiter is just entering Capricorn, and that is Jupiter's sign of fall, right? So Capricorn, when Capricorn behaves badly, Capricorn can tend to be a little dictatorial, to put it nicely. And so when you kind of enhance that nature, it doesn't really get very pretty. And so I don't think that we really get to see any kind of favorable influence from Jupiter making this aspect to Mercury exactly as the two shift into these signs that really don't serve them well, right at the exact moment of the full moon. So I'm saying this is not a favorable full moon. Yes, of course, you do still need to be concerned about finishing up things that need to be finished up, because we are entering a period of time where we're going to be feeling some shifts. We're going to have Venus stationing retrograde, which is something that only happens about once every year and a half. That's coming up this spring. She just went out of bounds, so we have that to contend with as well. And then we're entering our annual mid-year slowdown here within just a couple of weeks. And so all of these things come into play in terms of you really do want to have important stuff wrapped up right now because we're moving into the slowdown. We're moving into Venus about to station retrograde, which affects our relationships. It affects business. It affects all sorts of important things. And so we kind of really have no choice but to be finishing up things at this full moon. And I would encourage you, if you have the time, to go back and watch the Sidereal Insights Astro Update that broadcast earlier today on the Mystick, Physick, Astrology Facebook page, because I do talk about those transits in more depth. I don't really want to get into it with the full moon releasing, but this is definitely, I want to just underscore that this is a full moon where we need to be thinking about finishing things up. We need to be thinking about wrapping things up. But with that in mind, the outcome of an endeavor is determined by the condition of the ruler of the full moon, and our full moon ruler is not in really good condition right now. This is not a favorable full moon. So I would really strongly encourage you not to sign contracts right now. Don't enter into agreements right now. Don't enter into negotiations. Don't tell secrets expecting them to be kept right now. And don't tell lies, God forbid. Don't tell lies expecting that they can fly under the radar and remain undiscovered, because that's just not going to happen right now. This is a full moon. It's an ugly full moon. And under this particular full moon, I think contracts and agreements really stand a stronger chance of being destroyed or betrayed. This is a full moon that spells very clearly going back on one's word or being made a liar of in some of the more extreme senses in terms of how this astrological energy can play out. So that's something that's very, I think, important to keep in mind right now. You just want to really be on the up and up, and you want to trust that you may not have all the correct information, and you may in fact be being presented with misinformation. Now, with that in mind, whatever misinformation is at play right now, the truth is likely to come out later on regardless, which is why you just don't want to be playing with that kind of fire. It's just not good business anyway. However, it would really come back to bite you if you try to be dishonest or deceptive right now, or if you shared something in confidence that could be damaging if it were made public, if it came out later. This is just not the right time to be sharing sensitive information. Also, keep in mind, this is separate from the actual full moon itself. We have Mars and Uranus squaring off today, or tomorrow, as we get into the 6th, 7th. So be aware of that. It doesn't necessarily flavor the full moon itself, but it's a separate set of circumstances that are in play that could trigger a separate, a separate set of events that we might need to respond to. So with these two facing off, what happens is we end up seeing an increased risk of accident or injury. And so that's one thing to be aware of. But there's also a potential for a sudden change of pace or a sudden change of trajectory related to a course of action when we're talking about a square between Mars and Uranus. Hi, Dylan, you hear two of me. I don't know how that happens. That might be your phone, though. I hope it's your phone, because I can't hear any of me because of how I have my equipment set up. I hope that's your phone. I can try turning down the microphone gain, but there's not a second audio. I don't think that it would be picking up. You can let me know if that makes an improvement or if it makes things worse. I just turned down the microphone gain. Let me check on our YouTube stream. We are still streaming. That's quite exciting. We don't have anyone chatting at us on YouTube, which is fine. I'm going to keep, Dylan, because you're here, I'm going to keep the Facebook chat in front of me in case you or anyone else joining us live has comments or questions. But I am going to be keeping an eye on the YouTube chat. And actually, let me take a look at this. this chat bot thing. It doesn't seem to work. I'm going to have to troubleshoot this chat bot. I haven't quite figured it out just yet. We'll get there, though. All of this is brand new for me. But yes, Mars and Uranus in square. So just keep in mind the risk of accidents, the potential for sudden changes in terms of change of pace or change of directory, especially around activity that you might have going on right now. And so that really kind of wraps it for part one for talking about this particular full moon. If you have questions, please don't hesitate. Type them into the comments. I'll look at getting to them live, even if you're catching the replay. Go ahead and type in your questions in the comments, because I'll be happy to address whatever questions that you have. This is really kind of a weird full moon. It's just kind of yucky all the way around. I just don't like it at all. It's icky. That's my professional astrological opinion. It's icky. But diving into part two, what we're going to do here in part two is we're going to review which house of the chart this is falling into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign. And then in part three, we'll move on to the archetypes and themes of Virgo, and we'll move into our prompts. And so if you already know the houses pretty well, if you're comfortable with that, you can skip this portion. You can take a break. You can go get a snack. You can go refill your drink, whatever you need to do. If you don't know the houses, if you're not super familiar, sit tight, have your chart handy, know your rising sign. So you want to know what sign the ascendant is pointing to in your sidereal natal chart. If it happens to be Aries, this is a sixth house full moon for you. So sixth house, of course, has to do with work, it has to do with health, it has to do with daily routines, it has to do with employees and pets if you have them. It's really about your habits and your schedules. The sixth house also has to do with your health overall. So in that sense, it rules your diet as well, your lifestyle. So those are things to keep in mind, and especially where we're working with a full moon in the sixth house. This is really, full moons in the sixth house, I like them as opportunities for letting go of bad habits, bad health habits, or bad dietary habits. And so if you have Aries rising, I would really strongly encourage you to consider taking your releasing practice that direction. But of course, if you've come to the table with something already on your radar, that works too. For Taurus rising, this will be a fifth house full moon for you. So fifth house has to do with creativity, it has to do with children, it has to do with love and romance, right? So not marriage, that's partnership, that's Venus. This is the fifth house, so it's the natural house of Leo, rules the heart. So this has to do with pleasurable activities, things that we enjoy, that we delight in, things that we do for fun. And that includes sports, it includes competitive activities, things like risk-taking, gambling. Those are all fifth house activities, but hobbies, right? Crafts, creative activities. Those are also fifth house. If you have Gemini rising, this will be a fourth house full moon for you. So that has to do with home and property. It has to do with family. It has to do with your parents, potentially. It could be one or it could be both. But the fourth house definitely is related to real estate and your residence, where and how you live, that sort of thing. If you have Cancer rising, it's going to be a third house full moon. So that has to do with travel and communication, but it has to do with travel and communication that happens over short distances. So travel that's local to you, nearby, communication that takes place over short distances, very nearby to you. Also has to do with your community, your neighborhood, your immediate environment, your neighbors, your siblings, your extended family. So things like aunts, uncles, and cousins, those are also third house. If you have Leo rising, this will be a second house full moon for you. So that has to do with earned income and expenses. It has to do with wealth and possessions. It has to do with movable assets. It has to do with money that you earn, expenses, things like that. For Virgo, this will be a first house full moon for you. So the first house has to do with appearance and self-expression, right? Has to do with personality, it has to do with our identity, it has to do with our self-expression, our mannerisms, our behaviors, right? The physical body, the way we appear, the way that we dress. It also has to do with our role in the world. And so for Virgo, this is a first house full moon. Sometimes what you can see with the first house full moon is that a role that you have been playing in the world or embodying in the world might come to an end or might change in some way. You might mature out of or graduate out of a particular role. Okay. For Libra rising, this is going to be a 12th house full moon. So the 12th house has to do with privacy and seclusion, right? It's about withdrawing away from the world at large. It has to do with spirituality and turning inward, right? Our escapist tendencies, our addictions, the way we want to get away from it all. It has to do with our unconscious mind and our unconscious beliefs as well. And with a full moon in a 12th house, that could be a really fantastic time to look at letting go any old, outmoded, unconscious beliefs that you may have been carrying around that just don't serve you any longer, that may be standing in the way of you manifesting what it is that you really want because you internalized them so long ago, but they don't represent a truth that you want to experience in terms of your life, right? So consider using this particular full moon in that way if you happen to have Libra rising, because it will be a 12th house full moon for you. If you have Scorpio rising, it's going to be an 11th house full moon. So that has to do with friends. That has to do with organizations, hopes and dreams, right? And typically I would rub my hands together in glee at an 11th house full moon, because it can be an opportunity to see a long-held hope or dream come to fruition. I don't particularly like this full moon, as I was saying. If you have something in the works and you need to get it wrapped up, do it, I would say. Just understand that there may be things about it that you decide to go back and tweak, especially as we move into retrograde season. So I would just hang that caveat on it for those of you who have Scorpio rising. If you have Sagittarius rising, this is a 10th house full moon, which is, again, a poopy situation. 10th house, of course, is career and achievement. It's your professional life, right? It has to do with awards and recognition, status and reputation. This is not a good full moon for having to bring something related to your career, your professional life into, to present it into the world. So just know that the astrology does not necessarily work with you. However, be prepared to make changes or adjustments as necessary as more information becomes clear as we move forward. Because as I was saying earlier in the first part of this broadcast, we maybe either don't have all the information that we need, or we may be dealing with misinformation, and that the truth will come out later down the road. The clarity and the accurate information that we may be needing will come out down the road. So just be prepared for whatever that is to come to light and to adjust your approach for those of you who have Sagittarius rising right now. If you have something that you've been working on career-wise, if you can put a pin in it and kind of delay, I would encourage you to do that if you can do that safely without, harming your professional career or your reputation in some sort of way. Okay. If you have Capricorn rising, this is going to be a 9th house full moon. So that has to do with international affairs, right? That's travel over long distances, foreign travel. It has to do with immigration, publishing and broadcasting. So types of communication that take place over great distances, or that involve large masses of people. Elizabeth says, I have to go, but I'll catch the replay. Yes, do. We will be getting into the Virgo archetype and the prompts here in probably just about 5 minutes or so. So whenever you can come back, Elizabeth, definitely catch the replay. And as you have comments, definitely include them in the chat, because I will be around monitoring the comments for the remainder of the evening tonight, Elizabeth. But enjoy. I'm going to check on our YouTube stream. Hi, Alex. Thank you for joining us. So I'm kind of bouncing between two chat windows right here because the The integrated chat is not quite working right. I hope the audio is better this time around. You mentioned that it sounded distorted last time, and when I was doing some testing, it became clear that I have to start the different streams in a particular order. Otherwise, the audio on YouTube only gets weird and distorted. So I'm going to monitor both of these chats, but thank you everyone for joining me. Let's see where we left off here. So we were talking about Capricorn being ninth house, that being long distance communication or mass communication, right? But the ninth house can also represent religion, philosophy, law, things like that. It can represent our ideologies, right, and our philosophies in life. And with the full moon that we have right now, I think that you could see kind of the undoing of some false ideologies potentially as we move through the full moon and they are shown to be false, or the manner in which they're false is really kind of highlighted. I think you could see some breaking apart and falling away of some ideologies that just kind of aren't founded on solid, strong ground in that way, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. For Aquarius, this is going to be an 8th house full moon. So 8th house, of course, is other people's money. This is resources that come to you through other people in your life, including your partner, your long-term committed partner. It can also include investment earnings or insurance claims that are paid to you. It can include taxes that are paid to you, inheritance or estate monies that might be coming to you. It can also include bonus or commission income. But the flip side is that the 8th house also has to do with debts and monies that you owe, which means it can have to do with monies that you're investing, including losses that you might take on investments. It can have to do with insurance premiums that you have to pay, taxes that you owe. It can have to do with bonus and commission income if you earn money through bonus or commission income. And then if you want to kind of explore some of the more esoteric themes of the 8th house, the 8th house also has to do with the occult. It has to do with death, rebirth, and transformation cycles, metamorphosis, right? And so that's a theme of the 8th house. And the 8th house also relates to investigation and analysis. So deep digging, uncovering secrets, or mining for information and then putting it together in a way that kind of tells a story or a narrative, right? So if you're working with 8th house, it's the same, but it's understandable. That's disappointing, Alex. I'm glad you can understand it. What I think I will do is see if I can upload a fresh version of the broadcast afterwards. Yes, transformation for the 8th house, exactly. Metamorphosis. So the 8th house transformation really is the type of transformation that has to do with the complete breaking down and destruction of whatever came before, and then the total rebirth of that. So it's rebuilt and remade brand new, but better, stronger, improved. But there's no way to move through that type of 8th house metamorphosis, that 8th house transformation, without facing that destruction. 8th house also relates to sex, absolutely. And it is the sex that has to do with procreation. So 5th house, I would say that's sex for pleasure, right? Sex for recreation. 8th house, because we're talking about death and rebirth cycles, this is sex for procreation, okay? So just kind of an interesting little distinction between those two houses. If you have Pisces rising, this is going to be a 7th house full moon. So that has to do with marriage and partnership, right? That has to do with the long-term committed partnerships. That can include business partnerships. Relationships with other people in general are also described by the 7th house, and that can include our open enemies. It includes our rivals, right? And then when we're talking about the descendant specifically, we're also talking about what we tend to reject about ourselves. We're talking about the shadow self. And we're talking about what we tend to project onto other people. So these would be qualities or bad behaviors that we don't want to own up or face in ourselves. And so we tend to judge them or criticize them in other people because we reject that behavior, right? So that pretty well covers it for part 2, although if anyone's on live but joined late, if you joined after I covered what house this was falling in for you according to your sidereal rising sign, just let me know in the comments what your rising sign is and I'll recap it for you. And then after that, what we'll do is move on to part 3. And in part 3, we're going to talk specifically about Virgo archetypes and Virgo themes. We're going to dig into some prompts that we can use for the letting go process with tonight. And it's really kind of an interesting full moon. I would encourage you, this is a full moon for taking out the trash, like in every literal way, especially with it being in Virgo. Take out the trash, the mental trash. Take out the information trash, take out the actual physical trash in your house. It's just dump out the garbage and get rid of it. That's really a good way to use this particular full moon. I'm going to check the comments and see if we had anyone who needs a recap. And it doesn't look like it. So let's move in now then to part 3. And I may, for the YouTube audience, I may come back and break this up into 3 shorter videos. And that way, if you want to skip part 2, it's a little bit easier to do that. But here in part 3, what I want to do specifically is talk about the Virgo archetypes. And if y'all don't mind, I am going to lose my sweater because I'm a little warm. I was going to take it off before the broadcast started. And I totally didn't even think about it. So Virgo represents work, right? Virgo represents mundane, day-to-day, busy work, service work. It's the work that we do every day for pay. And it's the work of the people who serve us, including our pets and service animals, including our employees, if we have them, right? So that's kind of Virgo as the 6th house, to kind of give you a little bit of perspective there. So the archetype of Virgo is that of the maiden, right? She's the maiden. Her symbol is usually the maiden holding the sheaf of wheat when you see the constellation depicted. Virgo's also the healer. And in that respect, her symbol represents the service of doctors and nurses, and it invokes both her ruler Mercury and the caduceus, right? And I don't have a good example of that with me. I will see if I can include an image or graphic, maybe after the fact, or in maybe in the chat comments after the fact. But I'm referring specifically to the symbol for Virgo that is the MRX, and you see this a lot with older typefaces for astrological symbols where Virgo is written as MRX. The modern symbol that we use in the West, which is kind of the stylized MRX, it's an M with a little extra loop, right? Well, that MRX was always the shorthand notation for Mercury retrograde, right? And in the medical community, what we see quite commonly is that RX used to denote a prescription, a doctor's prescribed course of action, a remedy, if you will. If we want to use kind of the Vedic terminology, we could describe it as a remedy. So Virgo is concerned with remedies and course corrections. And this could be a good full moon to be thinking in terms of remedies and course corrections, right? But that retrograde notation used to denote prescription relates to going back over something, redoing something, taking a different approach in order to alter the outcome, right? Because what we typically see is that we're on a course that's headed to an undesirable outcome, and we need to course correct. And so that's where the retrograde opportunity comes into play, as an opportunity to course correct, to go back and do something differently, and to ideally move forward again, but towards a different, better outcome, right? So in some teachings, I want to talk a little bit about the counterpart Gemini, just to kind of highlight the difference between Gemini and Virgo, because they share the same ruler. They share the ruler of Mercury. And Mercury, of course, when we talk usually about the full and new moons in Gemini, we talk about the caduceus, especially when we talk about Mercury. Mercury is the healer, Mercury is the messenger, and that particular role. So I want to kind of contrast for you the difference here, right? So in some teachings, Gemini, which represents the twins, in some teachings it's perceived as Adam and Eve rather than male twins. So it's perceived as the male-female polarity. And so in that sense, Virgo could rightfully be considered the expression of the feminine half of that duality, that mercurial duality, that other feminine influence, as opposed to the messenger archetype, which is the more active principle, the masculine principle, Gemini, right? So Gemini is active, it's masculine. Virgo is feminine, and this is where we get into the healer, right? So Virgo's practical. Virgo is concerned with the day-to-day reality and meeting the needs of life. She's analytical, she's critical, right? So these are expressions that can manifest like others in either positive or negative ways. And when you have a challenging full moon, it's much more likely that we'll see these things manifest in the negative ways, right? We might see the more challenging aspects be what comes to the forefront. So Virgo represents then the work that we do to ensure the survival of the collective. And that is what she represents through her symbology of being the harvest. So it's the work that we willingly do now that's going to sustain us through the dark and unknowable future winter, right? So Virgo is very much about the practical aspect of faith, considering her counterpart is Pisces, and that has to do with spiritual faith. It has to do with faith in the intangible, the unknowable, the ineffable, right? So Virgo, being more concerned with practicality and real life, is about the actual physical manual labor of faith, of taking action today for a potential future harvest that we're going to need in the real world to sustain us, right? So if it helps you to kind of perceive them, the two, Virgo versus Pisces, in that way, she's a harvest. So it's faith, but it's tangible, practical faith, taking action today, kind of like, saving up for a rainy day. So what I want you to do is kind of reflect on Virgo's domain for a moment, the archetypes that she represents. And with those archetypes in mind, what you're going to do is consider where in your life, ideally represented, by the house that Virgo falls in for you according to your sidereal natal chart, where in your life can you consciously choose to let go of or release something that's not serving you any longer. This could be something like a bad habit. It could be an attachment to a daily routine that's holding you back. Could even be self-criticism. It could be if you habitually give yourself a hard time about something, or if you have negative self-talk, or if you feel like you fail to live up to your own standards. Maybe you need to let go of a bit of perfectionism, anything like that, right? Virgo is sometimes overly realistic. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about Virgo in terms of this ugly, yucky full moon. Virgo can be overly realistic. She can be hypercritical. She can be demanding in that way. Virgo can be kind of even a little cold and clinical, a little sterile, kind of like a hospital, right? So in some ways, Virgo lacks the warmth and compassion of her celestial counterpart in selfless service, which is Pisces, right? So we have service that we do as work, and we have selfless service in Pisces. So the Pisces Virgo axis describes our service. So Pisces Virgo prompts. I want you to consider, are you overly critical of others, especially when you're under stress? We're probably all under a considerable amount of stress right now. Are you sensitive to the orderliness of your environment? Because if you are, if your environment is not orderly, that could be triggering stress for you. And so maybe what you need to do is actually make changes to the orderliness of your environment so that you can be more productive. Consider, is there a pattern of behavior that you fall back on, which you can recognize as unhealthy, self-sabotaging, or destructive in some other way, and that you feel like you're finally ready to break free of? That's a good one. Is there a hurt or a wound or a dis-ease of some sort that you're holding on to that might be preventing you from finding true and permanent healing? Are you ready to consider letting that go? This could be an excellent time to do that. So whatever it is, I want you to take a moment to write down on your piece of paper. I want you to spend a moment to thank it, whatever it was, for the lesson that it brought to you into your life. What you're going to do when you're done writing down what it is you're letting go of this evening, you're going to state aloud to the universe or God or whatever it is that flips your switch. You're going to state aloud your intention to release it from your life and from your experience, and you're going to release it with gratitude for the lesson that it brought into your life while it was there, because that lesson, it served a purpose while whatever it was in your life. And so I want you to release it with gratitude and appreciation for whatever purpose it served. And then we just decide that we're ready to move on. So I'm going to back up just real quick and recap these prompts for anyone who might be joining late. I'm going to check on... Alex says, I love and hate Virgo. You know, I think a lot of people can easily have a love-hate relationship with Virgo. And I think in some ways it's that hypercritical, perfectionist tendency that Virgo has that can make us feel that way about it. But if you stop and think about it, that hypercritical, perfectionist tendency really just kind of is masking a vulnerability of some sort. Maybe it's a fear of failure, maybe it's a fear of judgment or of rejection or criticism. So when you can kind of come to understand that about Virgo, that it's really a very, it's trying to cover up some vulnerability there, right? It's maybe a little bit easier to have compassion for it. Oh, Alex, do you? I have Pluto in Virgo too, but I have it in the 4th house, and so maybe that affects how I feel it. I have Pluto in Virgo as well. It's kind of an interesting placement to have for sure. So who's with us on Facebook? Dylan is with us. So let me recap these prompts real quick. If you're ready to jump in, go ahead and jump in. If you're joining late, the Virgo prompts, what I want you to consider, excuse me, whether there's something that you can consciously choose to let go of or release that's not serving you any longer. That could be something like a bad habit or an attachment to a daily routine or part of your schedule. A self-criticism, if you have negative self-talk, or if you habitually give yourself a hard time about something or feel like you fail to live up to your own standards. It could be something like that. It could be being overly critical of others when you're under stress. If you're sensitive to the orderliness of your environment, maybe you're ready to let go of the chaos, right? If there's a pattern of behavior or something like that that you tend to fall back on when you're stressed, especially if it's a pattern of behavior that you recognize as being unhealthy, or self-sabotaging or destructive in some way. Sometimes this can be like poor food choices, especially when we're talking about Virgo and Virgo, the types of things that Virgo rules, because Virgo does have to do with diet, has to do with food. So if you're ready to finally break free of some of those things, consider doing your releasing practice around them this evening. Or I would encourage you to tap into the healing aspect of the Virgo archetype and maybe let go of something that is driving an underlying hurt, wound, or dis-ease of some sort. Something that you maybe are holding on to that is preventing you from finding true and permanent healing. Consider letting that go, or being willing to loosen your grip on whatever it is. And even if you are not fully ready to let go of whatever it is, if you can move into a space where you can say, okay, I'm willing to move into a space of being ready to let it go. All you have to do is open yourself up to being willing to move into that space. Even if you can't quite move there now, if you can open yourself up to being willing to do it, you invite that opportunity in, and you move that much closer to being able to release those things from your life, even if you're not quite ready. That was actually my trick for moving into forgiveness as I worked through a really, really difficult situation that made me very, very angry. Alex said, I want to lose 20 pounds. You know, Alex, so oftentimes there's something underlying, especially when it's stuff that we're holding on to and can't quite release physically. When it has to do with the physical body and weight, the exploration is getting into what is it that you're carrying that you can't let go of. Especially if it's something that especially if you have an ongoing struggle with your weight. I definitely subscribe, because I've seen it play out time and again, the notion of, as it is on the macrocosm, so it is on the microcosm, right? This as above, so below hermetic principle. As it is within, so it is without. The physical and the non-physical. And so when we're struggling to let go of something in the physical world, and that can be as literal as the weight on our body. Usually there's something in the non-physical that we're struggling to let go of too. And sometimes it can be hurts, like emotional hurts or wounds. Sometimes it can be burdens or judgments. Sometimes it's our own judgment of ourself. But usually there is something metaphysical some load, some hidden load that we're carrying around that we just won't set down, that we won't let go of. And so if you can spend some time exploring that in the non-physical, if you can pin it down, or at least come to understand what's driving it, sometimes that can make it easier to let go of the bad behavior, the way that it manifests in the physical realm. Which can be, something like fast food, or it can be something, some other type of poor diet manifestation. It can be something related to like physical activity or sedentary lifestyle or that sort of thing. Sometimes it can be easier to move through it in the physical if you take action in the non-physical. Now, vice versa also is true. Sometimes if you have trouble moving through something in the non-physical, if you stop and take action in the physical world. So keep that in mind. If you're ever feeling stuck in one way or the other, sometimes you can hack your way through a stuck situation by just flipping your approach. If you're stuck in the physical, go non-physical. And if you're stuck in the non-physical, if you're stuck in the energetic realm, turn to your physical world and see where's the bottleneck, where's the clog, and what can you do to move the energy through by dealing with the physical things. I find both work. Fast food and you work out, you want to lose 20 pounds. This could be a good time to let go of of unhealthy food choices. It could be worth spending time exploring what underpins the desire. Is it because you're looking for convenience? Is it because you have some other sort of hunger that you're trying to satisfy that's maybe not a food-related hunger? Play in the non-physical with it while you're thinking through the prompt and see if something shines a light on the underlying psychology, Alex, and that may inform what action you can take on the physical world. But everyone take a moment with your pen and paper, write down what it is you want to release, and then we'll circle back around here in a few minutes and share, if you would, in the comments what it is you are going to be letting go of tonight. I'm going to go ahead. Did I recap the prompts already? I think I did. Let me make sure I recapped all of them. Are you overly critical of others while you're under stress? Sensitive to the orderliness of your environment, ready to make changes so that you can be more productive? Is there a pattern of behavior that you fall back on which you can recognize as unhealthy, self-sabotaging, or destructive? Is there a hurt, a wound, or disease of some sort that you're holding on to, preventing you from finding true and permanent healing? Yes, it does look like we went through recapping all the prompts. So take a moment, write down what it is you would like to let go of with tonight's releasing practice, and then we'll come back and actually do the deed, do the releasing part. I didn't come prepared with paper. Let's see if I have some scratch paper handy. I might not. We'll see. I better not use that. It looks important. Okay, if anyone still needs time, please let me know in the comments. I think I'm finished with mine. It's kind of a weird one. It's the 4th house. For me, I have Gemini rising. Let's take a look. Looks like we're still good on Facebook, still good on YouTube, except for that weird audio thing. I'm going to have to figure out what's going on. Maybe it has to do with latency. I don't know. I'm new to some of this hardware and software, so I guess there's a learning curve. Not that that's a bad thing. So I have a 4th house full moon, which of course has to do with property and real estate, which has been a big theme for me lately, actually in the last couple of days, but also the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months. So what I wrote was that it's my intention to release any bad feelings. There's been lots of bad feelings related to property and real estate lately. I intend to release any bad feelings or lingering resentments that I have around my home, both the property itself and its condition in general, and the situation in which I find myself with regard to home ownership. That I release any judgments, complaints, ill feelings, resentments, irritations, and frustrations, and open myself up to the free flow of energy through and to my 4th house. So here we go. I release these bad feelings and lingering resentments. I release these judgments and criticisms and general grumpinesses with gratitude for the lesson that they brought while they were in my life. Probably lessons around protection and self-preservation, if we're being really real about it. I appreciate the lessons that these feelings brought to me while they were in my life. I'm ready to release them and let them go and move through them. I'm ready to be done with bad feelings related to property. And you can tell because look at that. It just burned up real quick. It just did not even stick around. Thank you, Alex. Let go of fast food and mean people. I like that. I think Virgo really has a place ruling mean-spirited people. And I'm not sure why that is. Maybe because of that hypercritical piece that Virgo can bring, and the fact that with Mercury as the ruler, Mercury of course rules language and communication. Maybe that just makes Virgo an energy where we feel inclined to speak our mind, right? Like the truth hurts, right? Thank you everyone for joining me. Let me know what you're letting go of in the comments, please. Elizabeth is going to come back and let us know later. So yeah, I'm ready to release bad feelings. Like, I'm ready to be through it. I'm done. I'm just done with it. I want to thank you all for joining me. Let me see if I have any notes or final comments or observations for you that pretty well covers the releasing part. Just burn your paper in a fire-safe place or tear it up into tiny little bits. If you burn it, just be safe with it. The main thing, if you burn it, you want to make sure you burn it completely. So if the paper doesn't burn all the way through the first time, relight it. Make sure you burn it all completely. And you just, as you burn it, you're going to state out loud that you're releasing it with the intention to send it with your gratitude, with your appreciation, and that you're just releasing this thing that no longer serves you. And that just helps make energetic space in your life for things that do and can serve you going forward to move in. But what happens after we have a full moon in a given sign, we get a bit of a break. We get a bit of a rest period where we can kind of take a breather in that part of our life. Until the next new moon happens in that sign, which is usually 6 months later. Now, I want to invite you If you're catching us on the YouTube channel, please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and you'll be notified every time I do go live or every time we upload a new video. It doesn't look like I have any real crazy announcements for you all other than, and I'm not really kind of prepared for this because it just came today. Like sometimes stuff just, you mentally catch in a net and it's like, oh, here you go. So we're coming up into the leading edge of the mid-year eclipse season. This is where I'm going with this conversation. And you all know that I like to do a broadcast where we get into the dates and the degrees, the nitty-gritties of all the stuff that you need to know for each eclipse season. So I spent some time today getting some of those details put together for the mid-year eclipse season. We're going to have 3 eclipses right in a row in June and July, June 5th, June 21st, and then July 5th. And so I want to talk about those. So we're going to be doing a live broadcast coming up probably within the next week or two, probably within the next week, but for sure within the next week or two, where we're going to talk specifically about our mid-year eclipse season. And that way you'll know what degrees you need to keep an eye on. Bring your chart so you can check and see if you have important planets or points at any of those. And then you'll want to bring your calendar because I'm going to give you dates to keep an eye on if you're going to be one of the people directly affected by any of these 3 eclipses that we have coming up in June and July. So what I'm saying is stick around because I am going to be sharing information about when that broadcast is going to happen here probably within the next handful of days. And so if you want to be notified, I would say definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel and consider signing up for the mailing list because I'll be letting everyone know through an email as well. And it doesn't look like the chatbot works at all because I've had chats from both sides, from Facebook and from YouTube, and it doesn't look like the chatbot is set up correctly yet. I'll have to look into that, figure out how to make that work better. Thank you all for joining me. It was wonderful to have you on. It's been kind of interesting to do this dance between Facebook and YouTube, but it's very fun to have folks on live in both places. I'm really excited about being able to go live on YouTube, so thank you for joining us on YouTube, Alex. Yes, it wouldn't be nice if it totally gets rid of this virus. I was thinking, too, about how it's very interesting that we have this full moon in Virgo right now while we have a global pandemic going on, and it is such a yucky full moon, right, in terms of not having all the information that we need to be able to take the right action or make the right decisions because of what's going on with Mercury, with what's going on with Jupiter. These are 2 planets that rule information, but they also rule the mind and our thinking and our analytical ability, our ability to understand and conceptualize and problem solve. So when we have the 2 planets that are most responsible for ruling the functioning of the mind, moving into really poorly situated places within the zodiac, right at the same time as the full moon, just really sets it up for very much an ugly scenario. This is not a pretty full moon. I definitely think that there are other ways that we are going to see the impact and the influence of this full moon that relate specifically to the pandemic. Partly because Virgo, of course, is the sign of healers. Partly because we're talking about the sign that rules hygiene and cleanliness. We're talking about a virus. We're talking about a germ that propagates. You can't even see it, right? That's so incredibly contagious. Yes, this ugly Mercury-Jupiter business, I think, is playing out in that sense as well. We're going to be watching it over the next couple of weeks. And so right now, I think it's safe to say, no, we don't have a clear picture of exactly what's going on in that regard, but clarity will come as we move through the worst of it. And I hope that you all are staying safe and staying sane. And I want to remind you, like I was saying at the beginning of the broadcast, please go easy on yourselves. Be gentle with yourselves. Be gentle with the people around you, because we are all under inordinate amounts of stress. Oh, you were talking about the eclipse. Yes, that would be nice if the eclipse could kind of eclipse out the virus. And I think there's a chance where we could see a little bit of that come into play. especially where one of our eclipses is in the sign of Gemini, which of course is also ruled by Mercury, which also in some ways has to do still with healing in that sense. I think we could, but I think this is one to keep an eye on. In part because it does seem so related to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction from January. And the Saturn-Pluto conjunction can continue to have an effect even after the exact conjunction point for up to 18 to 24 months potentially. So it's worth keeping an eye on. If that is a strong factor, we could see more continue with the virus over that time frame. Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe it's not so much tied to that particular conjunction. I think as we move further into 2020, we will get a clearer understanding of the virus itself and also the astrology driving it. Could be a lot of Pluto, could be a lot of Neptune, could be a little bit of both. That's for sure. Thank you all so much for joining me. It's really been wonderful having you, and please feel free to like and share this broadcast, tag a friend if you know someone who might be interested in going through the practice for the full moon in Virgo releasing that we just did. And I will see all of you again next time. I think our next broadcast is going to be Monday. It'll be a Sidereal Insights Astro Update. Let me see what the date is real quick. It's going to be Monday the 20th of April. And then I believe the 24th, 22nd, somewhere around there is when we have our new moon in April. And we'll talk more about the new moon at the next broadcast of Sidereal Insights Astro Update. That'll be on the Mystick, Physick, Astrology Facebook page, and I'll also live broadcast it to YouTube, and hopefully we can figure out what is the issue with the audio. Maybe that's just a bit rate issue. We'll see if we can iron it out before then. But thank you all so much for joining me. Let's see. Alex says, how about the Mula Ardra dance? Alex, that's a good question, and it's one that I don't know if I can really answer for you live, partly because I'm not super familiar with a lot of the Vedic aspect. I'm just kind of venturing into that territory and getting my feet wet. But I don't know that I can really speak to it with any real authority. Although, Alex, I would ask whether or not you're in the Facebook group. I created a Facebook group. It's called Sidereal Insights Astrology. There are other sidereal astrologers who are in that group, and some of them who actually post their astrological analysis, and so it might be worth popping in there and asking if you're a member. If you're not a member, if you want to join, just send a request and I'll approve it. But that's Sidereal Insights Astrology. It's on Facebook, and there are some really good Vedic astrologers in there who might be able to answer those questions better than I can, because I certainly I don't want to stick my neck out where I don't really have expertise. Maybe at some point we'll get there. But thank you all so much for joining me, and we'll see you again next time. It's super fascinating. I love it, and I'm getting quite a collection of books on Vedic astrology. I just haven't worked my way through all of them quite yet. But it's on my to learn list for sure. Maybe we'll find some more time for some of that learning while we're on pandemic lockdown, as it were. So thank you all so much for joining me. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy. Happy full moon. Right.